Hey there, Seahawks. It's Miss Adams, and in this video, we're going to go over the Wandering Point Desmos activity. So today in class, you're supposed to work on this activity, and I know some of you guys had some trouble. So you started with this. There were 4 points: 1, 2, 2, 6, 4, 2, and 5, 6. Then Desmos gave you the equation of the least squares regression line. So that was y1. So r and r squared were given to you. R was 0.3162. So they asked us to find R, so the correlation here was 0.3162. So there was a pretty weak correlation. And then they also asked us to write the equation for y hat. So y hat equals a plus bx. So y hat equals 2.8 plus 0.4x. And that would be our equation. And we can just use y and x because these variables, they didn't give us any context. They're just ordered pairs, x and y. All right, so now I'm going to add a new point, CD, as a 5th point, and see what adding that 1 point does. All right, so 3, 4 is this red point here. If I add that in, again, it says it is right in the center of the given points. So it's already on my line of best fit. So it's not going to change anything. My correlation is going to stay the same, 0.3164. My slope is going to be 0.4. My residual is actually going to be 0. Okay, so the residual is your actual value minus your predicted value. Well, if my actual value is on the line of best fit, it's on my prediction model, then what I'm predicting and what I'm actually getting are the exact same. So the residual is 0. Okay, and so that would not be really a leverage point at all. All right, so in order to be a leverage point, it has to greatly affect the slope. All right, so now I'm going to change that point, this 5th point, to be 8, 6. And that changes my correlation to 0.5. So the correlation is a little bit stronger. And it changes my slope. Doesn't change my slope actually, 0.4. So my slope is still the same. My residual would be my actual minus my predicted. Well, again, this point is also on the line, but far from the other points. Okay, so it's still on my line of best fit. So my residual would be 0. All right, and since it's not changing the slope, it's not a leverage point. All right, next I'm going to do 10, 7. Let's fit that in there. All right, 10, 7. So that changed my correlation. My new R value, which is here, is 0.6157. And my new slope is 0.422764. So it did change my slope, but not a whole lot. And then I can also pull up this other table here, and if I click under points, CD, and I can see E2 is what we're calling the residuals. Residual is 0.032, so it looks like it's on the line, and if you read the description, it's only close to the line, but much further away from the other points. So it is a small residual, like very small residual. It is further away on the x-axis, which means it has some leverage, but I would say it's not a high leverage point, okay, because it's not greatly changing the slope. The slope did change, but not a whole lot. All right, the next point I'm adding is 3, 8. So I need to change CD to be 3, 8. 3, 8, there it is. All right, so they're saying above the center of the original cluster. So 3, 8 changes my correlation to 0.2357. So it's getting weaker. And it changes my slope to 0.4, so my slope's not changing at all. But the residual here is very large. Okay, so my residual, if I can go down and look at the actual value, is 3.2. If I do my actual minus my predicted, here's what I actually had, the red dot. Here's what I predicted it to be. and you can calculate the difference there. So that's your residual. So it's a pretty large residual. And I would not consider this a leverage point. It's not impacting the slope at all. All right, then 1,7. 1,7. Nearby, but not consistent with the apparent pattern. So now it's changing the slope a lot. Okay, it's making the slope change from positive to negative, which is a big change. It also changed the correlation. So the correlation is now negative 0.04. So it's weaker, and it's changed from a positive correlation to a negative correlation. So that's interesting. That would mean our new correlation, negative 0.04572. Our slope is now negative 0.06. Our residual is pretty large. Let's see what they're saying. 2.3, large, maybe you might say medium. Alright, so it greatly changes the slope and it greatly changes the correlation. Biggest thing for leverage is the slope. The slope changed quite a bit, so we would consider this a high leverage point. Our residual is pretty large, maybe medium, something like that. The next point, 8, 9. Alright, 8, 9 changes my correlation to 0.7303, so stronger. It also changes my slope to 0.8, so it's further away, and it's also not very consistent with my original pattern. So if it's not consistent with your original pattern, if it's greatly changing your slope, it's going to be a leverage point for sure. Like my slope greatly changed. The correlation's now changed, the slope is now changed. The residual is pretty small, however, this value, this red dot, and where it would be on this blue line here are not too far from each other. Again, we could look down here. The residual is actually 0.8, which is not very large. All right, and then 10, 0. 10, 0 is even further away from the other points and out of the pattern. It's not consistent with what we had going on. All right, so this is going to greatly change my slope, which it does. It makes it from positive slope to a negative slope. It's also going to change my correlation. So my correlation is now negative 0.488, and my slope is now negative 0.3739. So this is a high leverage point, and the residual is not too large, it's not too small really either. It's kind of maybe medium, negative 1.1, small to medium residual. Okay. All right, so now when it comes to these questions, I'm not overly concerned with how you answered these. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this concept. It's not a big part of the AP exam. Neither is changing it so much so that it follows a linear pattern, like linearizing the data. That is part of what's talked about in this chapter 9 and 10 video notes. They're not huge topics on the test, but some of these questions are a bit more important. So 3, 4, which was right in the center of the data. Okay, so it's the average x value and the average y value. That point is always going to make its way onto your line of best fit equation. So that point is always going to be on the line of best fit itself. So that's the significance of that point. Also, any point that's on the line of best fit is obviously not going to impact the line of best fit. It's not going to change it if it's already on it. I'm going to skip ahead to what's the most important things here. So we already kind of talked about this, but a point that drastically changes the slope of the regression line when introduced or removed is called an influential point. So if it's greatly changing the slope, if it's changing the slope from positive to negative, it's influential. If it's just changing it drastically, like it's twice as large, it's influential. Influential points do not have to have large residuals. All right, so don't just assume that it has a large residual, so it's influential. Okay. If you're needing to be able to spot influential points on a scatter plot, you want to look for points that are very far out. Usually, the further out they are on the explanatory variable on your x-axis, the more influential they will be. And also, the further they are from fitting with the pattern or the overall trend. Originally, there were only 4 points here. Suppose instead we started with 50 points. So if we have 50 points, our data, the correlation, that all that stuff's going to be a little bit stronger. Would the 51st point still be as influential? Where might you place an additional point so that it was as influential as point G? Okay, so G was 10, 0. So if I added 10, 0, if I had 50 points kind of in the same area where they were, and then I added 1 point at 10, 0, it's not going to be enough. That 1 point is not going to be enough to greatly change it, because now that 50 points is so much more data, it's going to keep it kind of locked in. Before we only had 4 points, so 1 point really altered things. If I wanted, with the 50 points, I wanted still to have 1 point that I added that greatly changes the slope, I would want to move it way further out on the x-axis, so maybe like 100, 0, or 1,000, 0. If I added that 1 point, then you would see the slope greatly change.